Hello, everybody. Welcome back to World Geography. So, we're going to take a look at an assignment today where we will be answering the question, how do we measure development in different countries? We can measure, development for all kinds of things, right? Like people, how old are you, right? So we progress in age. We might progress in skill or education. We might add more hobbies, like grow our incomes as we work longer, that kind of thing. So we can measure the way people grow and develop, but we can also measure the way countries grow and develop. And so today we're going to introduce a few ways to actually measure that. Instead of like height for people or weight, we can use things like income and life expectancy, like you see up here on the screen. So let's go back to Canvas real quick. We've got assignment 3 up here. How do we measure development in countries? So I've got a couple of key concepts listed at the top. So we'll be talking about this Human Development Index. We'll be going back to gross domestic product, or GDP per capita. We'll talk about life expectancy, mean years in school. So I've got kind of what they're used for here, some definitions, some links here. So if you want to read more about that, if you're confused, you can do that. And then our actual assignment, what it'll be is down here. You're just going to type right into this document. It may ask you to log into your Google account, but once you do that, you should be able to type right in and submit that. And so if we pop over to Google Docs real quick, we can just see this document easier. Again, you have the key concepts listed at the top. We're going to do some data collection. So for task 1, you're going to use, let's see, this map right here. And so these maps are pretty easy to use. Over on the right-hand side, we've used these in class before. We have our data layers. So we want Human Development Index showing. Our legend says, okay, the dark green color, very high Human Development Index. Dark purple is low. So we'll kind of use this. And so to click into a country, we can see then its actual Human Development Index, that kind of thing. Then task 2, we're going to skip down and use a different map, similar but different map. So this map only has a few countries highlighted on it. If we go take a look at, say, Germany, we can click there and make sure we have our legend up. So we have very high, low, and medium development. But this actually breaks it down. So whereas the first map, if we go back there, just has our Human Development Index number. It's from 0 to 1. We have that. But we also have on this other map, we have the number and then the individual criteria. So what is the life expectancy? What is the mean years of school? What is the gross domestic product per capita? So we can see kind of how that forms and how that would be different, say, between Germany, 13 years of schooling, $45,000 of gross domestic product. Compare that to Egypt with 7 years, right? Half the amount of schooling and, 75% less GDP per capita at $10,000. So these maps we'll use to collect some data. And then at the end, we've got some analysis questions to take a look at that data. So a little bit of overview of the assignment. Again, we're going to be answering this question of how do we measure development. So let's get into what development is. A lot of times we think about development in just terms of wealth, like, oh, these are wealthy countries, these are poor countries. We often do this in terms of people too. But of course, there's other ways to take a look at development beyond money. So that's where the Human Development Index comes in. This link here goes to this website. The Human Development Index is a measurement created by the United Nations. And so this gives us a little graphic organizer here to basically say, well, we want to take into account standard of living for the Human Development Index, but we also want to take into account knowledge and education. And we also want to take in health, right? So we take these 3 things and we compile them into what's called an index. Now, if you follow sports or anything that tries to rank groups or people, an index is just like a sports ranking. Like if you follow college football or college basketball or pro sports, then each team during the year is going to be ranked. And that ranking will consist of maybe like how many wins and losses they have, what's their strength of schedule. If you're taking a look at soccer, then how many goals do you have? What's your goal differential? So those numbers are all used to compile a ranking, right? And so you'll have a number 1 team, a number 10 team, and one team might have more wins, but another team might have a stronger strength of schedule, right? They play more difficult teams, and maybe they have a couple losses, but the ranking makes up for that. So that's like an index number. And that's exactly like the human index, where we're taking 3 different things and using them to form one single statistic. So if we go back, our standard of living is our gross domestic product per capita. So that's the actual statistic we'll use. Knowledge is going to do mean years of school. So that's just the average numbers of years of school. Here in the United States, it's about 13, right? So you finish high school, and there you go. And then long and healthy life, that will be done by life expectancy. So when we take a look at this, we get countries, we go back to this, like the United States, 0.924 Human Development Index. So 1 is the highest on this, and 0 is the lowest. So you want to be closer to 1. The United States is pretty close to 1 at 0.92. And so we've got fairly high mean life expectancy. We've got a fairly high mean years of school, and we've got a fairly high gross domestic product per capita. So that means that we're quite highly developed. There's a few other ways we can take a look at this, though. Here's some data. I think we looked at this in class before the dismissal. But on the vertical axis, right, we have life expectancy. So we see no country has less than 52 years of life expectancy. That is quite low, but no one's lower than that. And then over on the top side, looks like Singapore is at the top, 85 years. So that's a pretty big gap. So we can see all these countries and their life expectancy. We also have income at the bottom. So this is the horizontal axis. So the lowest income on this data is Somalia at $631 per person per year. The highest income is Qatar over in the Persian Gulf area, and they rank at $113,000 per person per year. The United States kind of sits towards the top, $56,000 per year, and a life expectancy you can see on the left-hand side of 78.6. But let's see how this changed over time. So I'm going to hit this play button, and we're going to watch how countries progressed in income and health. So the higher they rise on the graph, the healthier they are. And then the further to the right they move, they're gaining more income. So let's go back to the year 1800, and let's see how this plays out. Okay, so we have China right here, the large bubble, India. The United States is this one right here. So we're in the 1870s. And we have slowly moving to the right, gaining income, and slowly moving up. Now that dip right there, let's pause. That dip is really interesting given the time we're in, because let's go back to, so this is World War I partially, but then also the global Spanish flu pandemic in 1917, 1918. You can see that bounce in life expectancy. Let's go back. 1915, bounce down, and then back up. So that's a combination of World War I and the Spanish flu pandemic impacting life expectancy there. So let's keep going through the 1920s. This was a good year for our economy, but then we hit the 30s and the Great Depression. So finally, after the 1950s, you see really the entire world progressing at a good rate. Are some countries further behind others? Yes, they are. But everyone's making good progress after World War II. So we can watch that play over time. Let's go back real quick and take a look at Human Development Index. So 0.2, that's low. 0.9 is very high. And then let's compare that to our economic sectors. So I've got agriculture, percentage of your workforce working in agriculture. And what do you notice? The higher percentage of agriculture labor, the lower the Human Development Index. And we talked about in our previous lesson that we wanted to shift workers in general from the primary agricultural work into the secondary and tertiary. So making stuff and providing service. That's typically where we find higher incomes. And so you see a country like the United States, about 1% or so people working in agriculture, and we have a very high HDI. Germany, Denmark, all these countries that have high HDIs have low percentages. We can also play this over time too and watch that as percentage of agriculture workers goes down, Human Development Index rises. And just for fun, let's go percentage of services. We see the same thing, but in reverse. So the lower percentage of your GDP that is from services, the lower your Human Development Index. The higher that percentage of service work, the higher your Human Development Index. So it's a good thing generally to have many more people working in services. Let's take a look at one more data set. Let's compare mean years of school and income. So mean years of school, you got 2 years down here, like Ethiopia. On average, people go to school for 2 years. Their income per person on average is $982. So neither of those numbers is very good. China, up to 8,600 in income per year, and 7 years of school, almost 8 years of school. You can see on the left-hand side. Let's go for the United States, 48,000 of income and 13.7 years of school. So generally, there's this positive trend. If we can draw a line on our graph here, then what we can do is draw a trend line. So generally, as mean years in school goes up, income increases, right? So we can see that positive relationship there. All right, let's erase that line and go back. So that's our little lesson for today. What is the Human Development Index? So we hopefully learned about that. We've also got GDP per capita, life expectancy, mean years in school. And we defined and looked at some data of what those things mean and what they look like out in the real world when we compare countries. So take a look at this data, collect it as you're asked in the assignment, and then work on your analysis questions, and we'll get those scored up and get some feedback to you guys. Hope you're doing well, and we'll see you for the next assignment. Thanks.